This video will cover a mythology iceberg. If you're unfamiliar, iceberg videos explore a topic and following what an iceberg would be, right? It moves from the most familiar part of the topic to the most obscure and unknown. And here, I'll focus on mythologies that are known and unknown in Brazil, not in the whole world, okay? Because that makes the job easier. In this first layer are the mythologies that have been most adapted throughout history. You watching can probably name at least one god from these mythologies. You may not realize it's from a specific mythology, but you definitely know at least one of these gods' names. The first one couldn't be any other than Greek mythology. I was torn between it and Norse mythology, but I feel like Norse mythology has started to appear more in adaptations lately. Greek mythology. I remember getting tired of turning on the television to channels like Sistema Brasileiro de Televisão. There always seems to be a movie about the Odyssey, Achilles, Hercules, Clash of the Titans, Percy Jackson, and similar stories. It's also seen in other media such as the Dora 4 game and Disney's Hercules. In this case, it's actually Roman mythology, but you know what I mean. In Greek mythology, we have the main pantheon, the gods of Olympus, who took control of the universe after defeating the old gods, the so-called Titans. Kronos, the former leader, is the father of Poseidon, Hades, and Zeus, the main Greek gods. In this case, Hades is not considered an Olympian god because he is not part of Olympus. He doesn't live there. Instead, he stays in the underworld. There are over 12 Olympian gods, but the main ones are Zeus, king of the gods and lord of the skies, Hera, queen of the gods and goddess of marriage, Poseidon, god of the sea, Demeter, goddess of agriculture, Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, Apollo, god of the sun and music, Artemis, goddess of the hunt, Ares, god of war, Aphrodite, goddess of love, and Hephaestus, god of fire and the forge, Hermes, the messenger of the gods, protector of travelers and commerce, Dionysus, god of wine, festivities, and sometimes madness. And sometimes Hestia can also appear instead of Dionysus, as she is a goddess of the hearth and home. You can become a god of likes by liking, subscribing, sharing, and hyping the video. If you want to help me even more, if you can help me even more, become a channel member. It's just a small amount, and you help me a lot. You also get early video access. Thanks to all channel members. Let's keep it up. Roman mythology is the second most well-known, mainly due to its connection to Greek mythology, though they are not the same. Even though the Romans included some stories from Greek mythology in their gods, the gods themselves have completely different personalities. For example, Ares, who is often humiliated in Greek mythology. It's the opposite of Mars, who in Rome was a very important god and part of the Trinity of gods, along with Jupiter and Quirinus. Quirinus, unlike other gods, had no Greek equivalent and symbolized Rome itself. Quirinus, the Roman ruler, was actually Romulus, Rome's first founder and brother of Remus, the famous twins, sons of Mars, said to be nursed by a she-wolf. That story also isn't found in Greek mythology, but the main character from Roman mythology, best known to the general public, at least in Brazil, would be Hercules, son of Jupiter, mainly because of the Disney movie. The third mythology is Norse, also mostly due to a specific character, Marvel's Thor. These days, if you kick a tree on my street, several Thors will probably fall out. For example, we have Thor from God of War, Assassin's Creed, and Netflix. A curious fact about Thor is that, believe it or not, a lot of people think Thor was created by Marvel. They don't realize Thor is a Norse god, a god of the V. Also, I made a Thor tier list on the channel. Norse mythology doesn't actually center on Thor, but on Loki, who creates most of the stories and problems in that universe. He kills Baldur, starts Ragnarok, and will battle the Aesir, the war gods in the mythology. His children Jormungandr, Hela, and Fenrir will help him end the gods and the Norse world in Norse mythology. We also have Asgard, the main home of the gods, the Aesir gods, the gods of war and death, and there's also Vanaheim, the home of the Vanir gods, the gods of fertility and nature. The main Norse gods are Odin, father of the gods and god of intelligence and death, Tyr, god of diplomacy, Freya, goddess of death and fertility, and Freyr, god of fertility and combat, Frigg, Odin's wife and the goddess of marriage, Baldur, the god of light, Heimdall, the guardian of Asgard, and Mimir, the god of knowledge. These, along with Hel, goddess of death, are likely the most well-known Norse gods, and all of those I mentioned here, except for Hel, are also considered gods of war. The fourth mythology, which I hesitated to include in the first layer, is Egyptian mythology, also because of another specific god, Anubis, who just might be the most well-known god of all. He's a jackal that looks like a dog, and everyone loves dogs. Interestingly, Anubis isn't actually one of Egypt's main gods. The main ones are Osiris, Ra, Set, Nephthys, Isis, Horus, and Anubis. He wouldn't even be a god of death, as he is widely known. He's a god of mummification and a psychopomp. The god of death would actually be Osiris, the psychopomp. They would be those gods who are reapers, who take the soul and carry it to the underworld. Or for Anubis, to Osiris's judgment hall, where the soul of the dead would have its heart weighed against a feather. And if that heart was heavier, it would be devoured by the monster Amit, or else it would go to Duat along with Osiris. Egyptian mythology's main story is the Osiris cycle, also called the birth of Horus, when Osiris is killed by his brother Set. But he ends up being resurrected by Anubis and has enough time to father Horus with Isis. Horus returns to Egypt, defeats his uncle, and reclaims the throne. It's a story much like Hamlet, which is also similar to The Lion King. I could also include here, in this chamber, the Orishas from Yoruba mythology, who are very well known, especially Exu, who is the messenger of the Orishas. Yemenja, Orisha of the rivers, Zango, Orisha of thunder, and Oxum, Orisha of beauty and rivers. Ogum, the Orisha of blacksmiths and fire, Okshosi of the hunt, Amalu, who is the Orisha of diseases and healing, and Oxala, the creator of the world. They all answer to Olarum, the supreme god. To wrap up the first layer, there's also an honorable mention for Christian mythology in the Bible, which may be even more famous than Greek mythology, where we have the world's creation in 7 days, Adam and Eve and all the angels, archangels, seraphim, and cherubim. And of course, Satan, Lucifer, who opposed Michael and his angels, fell from heaven and created hell. In the second layer, we also have well-known mythologies. However, they are not as adapted as the previous ones, or are just starting to be adapted now, starting with Buddhist mythology with, of course, the most well-known character, our dear Buddha, the first Buddha. In this case, Siddhartha Gautama, who is so well known around the world, is present in several different mythologies, such as the Chinese and Hindu. Overall, Siddhartha's story says he was a prince. When he learned about death and illness, he left everything behind to escape the anxiety and fear of losing everything after death. During his journey, he discovered meditation, and after much practice, achieved enlightenment, becoming the first Buddha. There are some stories that include some supernatural elements, like the demon called Mara, who tried to disturb Siddhartha's concentration during his enlightenment. And they also say that he disappeared from his palace with the help of magical beings. Next, in this case, would be Jewish mythology, the sister of Christian mythology, which in theory would be the same God as the Christians, just worshipped in a different way. So for that reason, I include it here. The main difference is that here, Jesus isn't as important as for Christians. He's not the Son of God or the Messiah. Here is the famous battle between Baramoti, the beast of the earth, and Leviathan, the beast of the waters, set for the end of times. And the flesh of both will feed the Jews. In this mythology, we also have the famous angel Metatron, God's scribe, who records everything that happens and will happen. There's also a mention of Arab or Islamic mythology, which, like Christian mythology, is related to Jewish mythology. Allah, in this case, would be the name given to the Islamic god, in quotes, and he is also a very well-known figure in this mythology. The jinn, or genies, who are the demons of Islam, are the ones who tempt those who are farther from Allah. The main one is Iblis, the Islamic devil. The next mythology in the second layer is Celtic mythology, whose gods aren't as well known. Here, I'm referring to the Tuatha De Danann, essentially the Celts' Olympians. It features gods such as Nuada, the silver arm, Lug Lamfada, Morrigan, the death goddess, and Dagda, god of fertility. The most famous beings in Celtic mythology are the fairy folk, especially leprechauns. Goblins like Puck, actually Robin Goblin, were created by Shakespeare. And there's also King Arthur, who is extremely popular and is part of Celtic mythology. Even later, receiving the Matashima. What Christian influence? Thanks to Merlin, he would have ruled Camelot with the Knights of the Round Table. After Merlin was trapped in a cave by the Lady of the Lake, and Lancelot betrayed King Arthur by getting involved with Queen Guinevere. His kingdom fell when his son Mordred killed him, and his sister Morgana betrayed him. Now let's discuss Japanese mythology, which anime has made more popular. Although it's been more about the yokai, the Japanese monsters, like Grandma Turbo from Dan, a legend about an old lady chasing cars. But the gods themselves aren't that well remembered, especially the main ones. That's Susanoo, god of seas and storms, Amaterasu, sun goddess, and Tsukuyomi, god of the moon. They're best known as jutsus from Naruto. Out of curiosity, these three are the children of the gods Izanagi and Izanami, who also appear as jutsus in Naruto. After Izanami died, Izanagi followed her to the underworld. But unfortunately, as in the story, he returned empty-handed. After his bath, Amaterasu, Tsukuyomi, and Susanoo were born from his eyes and nose. I was almost forgetting to thank the people on Discord who helped me a lot with this iceberg. I won't name everyone since I might forget someone and upset them, but thanks to everyone on Discord for the help. To join, use the link in the pinned comment. The Chinese girl is in the second layer for the same reason as the Japanese girl. She often appears in anime, especially Dragon Ball, like Shenlong, the Chinese dragon god who controls the weather. Journey to the West appears often in Dragon Ball. Lately, the Monkey King story has been popping up frequently too. Black Maid or Wukong is a good example. On the third layer, it starts to get underground, but some elements are still well known to the public. Well, let's start here with Hinduism, which, if it were an iceberg of the most well-known mythologies in the world, it would definitely be on the first layer, or at least in the first two layers. After all, it's the third largest religion in the world. In Brazil, I think it's much harder for people to know about it. People might even recognize, for example, that little statue of a chubby elephant, but they probably won't know that it's Ganesha. Ganesha is the god of intelligence and luck who removes obstacles. That's why it's very common to see his image in front of some businesses or some companies that are just starting out, so that it brings luck to their owners. But Ganesha isn't even the supreme god. The supreme god in Hinduism is Brahman, but Brahman isn't exactly a god. It's more like an energy everyone is part of. The deities such as Shiva, the destroyer, Brahma, the creator, and Vishnu, the preserver, are all manifestations of Brahman. Another mythology I think should be included is voodoo mythology, which interestingly lacks well-known deities here. What is most well-known about voodoo? Actually, it would be the voodoo doll ritual, where a person takes a little doll and pokes it, trying to affect someone else. But that's not exactly true. Those dolls that were found were mostly used for spiritual communication, rather than anything else. Not exactly like Woody Woodpecker and other media showed us. For voodoo deities, there are Loas, like Papa Legba, guardian of paths and crossroads. He acts as a liaison between humans and the Loas. Damballa, the sky serpent, is linked to spiritual wisdom, purity, and water, and he is usually revered on Thursdays. His color is white. Idawedo, partner of Damballa Loa, the rainbow serpent, is linked to beauty and unity. We also have Baron Samedi, likely the most famous here. He is the lord of the cemeteries and is connected to death, funeral rituals, and is the master of the spiritual world of the dead. And we have several others. Now let's move on to Mayan mythology, which, interestingly, is often remembered because of its connection to its sister mythology, which is the Aztec. Their most well-known god is probably Kukulkan, the feathered serpent god, who is very similar to Quetzalcoatl, who is also a feathered serpent god, but from the Aztecs. Other Mayan gods would be, for example, Huracan, who is the god of storms, wind, and fire. He appears in creation and catastrophe myths. And Zana, the creator god, lord of the sky, wisdom, writing, and science. Shak is the god of rain, thunder, and lightning, crucial for agriculture and precipitation control. Ixal is the goddess of the moon, fertility, childbirth, medicine, and water. We also have other gods. Now, regarding Aztec mythology, which is linked to the Day of the Dead, a famous tradition in Mexico, We have the famous battle between the gods Tezcatlipoca and Quetzalcoatl, and it actually goes a bit further than that. Other gods also shine and battle them for control of the universe. Among the main Aztec gods is Ruiz do Apócrifo, the sun and war god and patron of the Aztecs. He was so important to them that they even made human sacrifices to the sun to ensure it kept moving across the sky. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, is the god of wind, learning, culture, and fertility. Scatrapoca, meaning smoking mirror, is linked to Venus and is the god of destiny, night, sorcery, change, and sometimes chaos. He was Quetzalcoatl's rival, and they constantly fought. There's also Tlaloc, the god of rain, storms, and fertility, who was vital for agriculture and good harvests. Zepitotec, the most bizarre Aztec god, appeared as if he had no skin. The ritual for him was also very bizarre, because actually this god is called the Flayed One. In this ritual, a person's skin was removed, and the priest wore it while walking around the empire. Quatrecru, the goddess of earth and fertility, was the mother of many gods, including Huitzilopochtli. She symbolized both creation and destruction. Mictlantecutli, the lord of Mictlan and god of death. And there's also Tonatiuh, the god of the sun, or the present sun, the fifth sun, who ruled the daytime sky, requiring sacrifices to keep the sun on its path. And so life goes on. Now about Mesopotamian mythology, where we have the great battle between Marduk, the god of gods, and the queen of dragons, Tiamat. This, in fact, is probably one of the first mythologies that ever existed, if not the very first. With the support of the other gods, giving powers, weapons, and armor to Marduk, he defeated Tiamat and used her body to create the world. And besides Marduk, we had Ereshkigal and Nergal as gods of death. Shamash, the sun god of justice and divine judge, protector of truth. Ishtar, goddess of love, fertility, war, and a prominent figure in many myths. Nana, the moon god, was key to the calendar. Anu, the sky god, is often called the father of the gods. Enlil, the god of winds, hearth, and storms, was a key deity who played a central role in separating the sun and earth. And Enki, the god of fresh waters, wisdom, magic, craftsmanship, and human creation. We finish the third layer with Canaanite mythology, which may be very little known by the general population, just like the mythology itself, but certainly many of its gods are indeed known because they are in the Bible. The most famous of them is Baal. From Baal, in fact, comes Beelzebul, the famous demon of the flies. The Baal cycle, where Baal becomes ruler, is likely the most famous story from this mythology. Over the gods after Otaria, the sea god, and one of his pets, a giant serpent with several heads called Lothan. Baal ruled the world until Moth killed him, but Baal returned, defeated Moth, and became king again. The fourth layer, we start with North American mythologies, where there is, for example, the Wendigo, which is very well known. It's a Canadian legend from the indigenous peoples. It's very well known, for example, for appearing in Supernatural. It's a legend from the Algonquian indigenous people. Now, about their actual gods, we know very little, especially because they had oral traditions, passing down stories through tales. But one of them is, for example, the Great Spirit, who is the main deity in their mythology. He is seen as the creator of everything and is deeply valued by the indigenous people. Different versions of the Great Spirit appear throughout this mythology. Portrayed as wise and benevolent, the Great Spirit is revered by these people as the embodiment of balance, harmony, and all existence. He is believed to have created the world and to be the source of knowledge and wisdom. Sakra. This belief is reflected in the way the Algonquian people live their lives. In the rituals and ceremonies they perform, they honor the Great Spirit by respecting all living things and living in harmony with nature. Now let's move on to the United States. We have the Navajo, known for skinwalkers, made famous by Supernatural and TikTok's skinwalker pets, which aren't real. But the original name of the skinwalkers is actually Yenaldush, which is a name that even appears in Ben 10. In this case, they would be witches who take animal skins and transform into them, with bears being the most common, and any animal that has 4 legs, as long as it's about the size of these witches, right? Now, about the gods themselves, it's really hard to find, but what did I end up finding? There was, for example, Mai, who is a trickster god, A god of mischief, Asunutri, who is the god of the winds. Bigaside, who is another trickster god. Bigroso is the messenger god of communication, and Stanitleri is the goddess of time and days. Well, the next mythology I'm going to talk about here is Inca mythology, which is among the American mythologies, right? Aztec, Maya, and Inca. But out of these three, it's much less famous. Maybe the most well-known of these gods is Viracocha, who the natives said existed even before the world itself. There was a being called Viracocha. He created the first world in darkness, without sun, moon, or stars, earning the name Pachayashi Viracocha, meaning creator of all things. Viracocha first created giants to see if making humans was worthwhile. He decided to shape humans as we know them today, but they still lived in darkness. He ordered them to be just and to serve, but humanity ended up becoming corrupted. Because of this, Viracocha ended up punishing them. He turned many into stone, made the earth swallow some, and had the sea take others away. He sent a great flood called Unipachut, meaning water that turns into land, lasting 60 days and nights. Almost everything was destroyed, leaving only a few traces, like stone figures and ruins. In Pucara, 60 leagues from Cusco, this warns future generations of the consequences of disobeying Viracocha. Other Inca gods include the sun god, Mama Aquila, the moon goddess, Pachamama, the earth goddess, Ilapa, the goddess of thunder, and Mama Cocha, goddess of seas and rivers. In Gnosticism, we have the Demiurge, who became very well known because of memes, which, by the way, are really good, especially that one with the bricklayer's glove. Take that, Demiurge. I won't go into Gnosticism now since I already have a full video on the channel about it. But in short, Gnosticism is the idea that the material world was created by a false god called the Demiurge. He tries to keep people focused on this world and away from the true God. There are also many emanations, such as the Aeons. And in response, the Demiurge also has his followers, in quotes, the so-called Archons. And now we can move on to Slavic mythology, which has two beings that are actually quite well known. Chernobog, who appears in the Disney movie. Baba Yaga became widely known as John Wick's nickname, representing a bogeyman in this context. Or a witch who lives in her house in the middle of the forest, and this house has chicken legs. She stays there waiting for her victims. Chernobog is considered a god of chaos, death, and evil in Slavic mythology. They say he would face Belobog, the white god, who seems suspicious. I didn't find many references to him in the mythology itself, but anyway, in this mythology we also have a kind of Zeus or Thor, who is called Perun, one of the two thunder gods, who, armed with an axe and riding his horse constantly, hunts the underworld serpent Veles. But isn't Perun the creator in this mythology? Actually, the creator is the god Hodi, and there is also a very important god called Svarog, who is the god of fire, and Alada, who is the goddess of love and beauty. The next mythology is Hawaiian, which is briefly known because of the movie Moana. Where do they place Maui? Maui was a legendary hero in Polynesian mythology, with tales found on nearly all Pacific islands. In some places, he is seen as a god, in others as a demigod, or even as an ordinary human. Though different, his legends are so similar that he became a character, uniting cultures separated by thousands of kilometers. The way Maui is portrayed varies a lot. He may appear as a handsome young man, a wise old man, or a typical trickster, but his mischief always ends up helping humanity. His feats include bringing fire, lifting the sky, and capturing the sun. The legends also highlight his special powers. In Hawaii, he had a magical fishhook named Maniakalani, while in New Zealand he used an ancestor's jawbone. Even so, Maui was depicted with very human traits. He lived in straw houses, cared for his mother, and had adventures with his brothers. In the Hawaiian pantheon, Pele is the goddess of fire, volcanoes, and dance, and she is well known for her eruptions and earthquakes in the Hawaiian archipelago, especially at the volcano called Kilauea. Pele is a major Hawaiian goddess. Aina is the goddess of the moon, fertility, and women, and she has a very strong relationship with Maui. She is responsible for maintaining balance in his actions, and in this way, creating harmony in the world. There's also Ku, or Q, whichever way you want to call him. He is the god of war and is often associated with strength and courage. He is one of four main gods in Hawaiian mythology. Tangarua is the god of the ocean and sea creatures, while Talhir and Matea are gods of winds and storms. Papatuanuku, also known as Papa, is Mother Earth, wife of Hanji, and mother of gods such as Tangarua and Tani. She represents the earth and all living things. Of course, there are many other gods. And now we come to Brazilian mythology, which in reality should be plural. Brazilian mythologies, since the indigenous peoples, each of them, have their own mythology. I won't discuss them all, but I can share a bit. Possibly the most recognized ones are Tupa, Ayanga, and Jurupari, though well-known applies mainly to those interested in this niche. Since most people aren't familiar with Brazilian gods, Tupa is almost always featured in these mythologies. He is usually linked to thunder and storms. Before humans existed, Tupa reportedly married Ayesi or Aresi, the sky's mother goddess whose home was the moon. Although most of the time Ayasi appears as a man, Tupa and Ayasi met through a constellation of stars, and it took years for them to meet. According to the myth, Tupa and Ayasi descended to Earth one day after their wedding. Together they created rivers, seas, forests, stars, and all living beings in the universe. They say that the place where they were creating these things was at the top of Araqua Hill. Ayanga is quite curious, though it's also a protective spirit of the forest. Appearing as a white deer, at some point he ended up becoming the lord of the underworld, and thus also became a god of death. Jurupari is similar to Jesus as the Son incarnate on earth born of a virgin. He became ruler of all, but later turned into a demon. He allegedly killed a boy, and the Guaraná plant is believed to have grown from the boy's eyes. And in the fifth layer, we start with Inuit mythology, which refers to the people commonly known as Eskimos. And there are several really bizarre creatures, like, for example, Adelit, who, according to the stories, Nevershiang had already rejected many suitors, and her father, named Savarguan, already out of patience, told her that if no man was good enough for her, she could marry a dog. The next day, a new suitor named Ijerguan knocked on her door, wearing an amulet shaped like dog claws. This time, Nevershiang accepted her suitor, and they moved to a nearby island. After a while, Nevershiang began to suspect that her fiancé, her husband there, was actually a dog who could take on a human form. But her suspicions were only confirmed when she gave birth to a litter of 5 puppies and 5 human babies. These half-human, half-wolf beings are called Adelit, and there's also the extremely bizarre legend of the Tupilak, which is a kind of creature. Well, I can't say exactly what it would be. Created by witchcraft and shamanism practitioners, it uses parts from various animals or people. It is invisible to everyone, except for its creator. The Tupilak could be sent to seek out and destroy a specific enemy. However, if its target was someone with magical powers greater than its creator, it could turn against the creator to kill him. As a last resort, publicly confessing to being the creator of the Tupilak would break the magic and destroy it. There are several sculptures representing this creature, which are very important parts of Inuit art, being carved in many different shapes and sizes from various materials, like walrus and narwhal tusks, caribou antlers, or wood. Now, regarding the gods, there's the story of siblings Igaluki, the moon god, and Melina, the sun goddess. But since the story is extremely heavy, I'm going to tell it here in a very summarized and censored way. For YouTube, please don't eat me. Igaluki one night tried to do things to his own sister. She didn't want to, so she started to run away. He went after her, and the moment she ascended to the heavens, he followed her. And in that, Igaluki ended up becoming the moon, and his sister, the sun. Next is Filipino mythology, which is largely unknown, but features some really cool and interesting monsters, like the Titbalan, which is described as a creature that is half horse and half human. And it's not exactly a centaur, because actually it has the head and sometimes the hooves of a horse, but the body belongs to a tall, strong man. His legs are so long that when sitting, his knees are higher than his head. According to legends, Titbalan usually lives in huge trees, forests, mountains, or swamps. And from up there, he keeps watch over his territory and attacks anyone who dares to invade his space. There's also Banukawa, who is a deity from Filipino mythology, often depicted as a giant sea serpent. She was believed to be an underworld goddess, often held responsible for eclipses. The serpent has a mouth as big as a lake, a tongue as red as blood, and whiskers and claws like a catfish. And it also has 2 pairs of wings, one larger pair and one smaller pair found lower on its body. It always tries and sometimes succeeds to devour the moon. About the gods, we have the creation legend of the world according to Filipino mythology. In the beginning, the universe was inhabited only by 3 beings: Bitala, a giant who ruled the earth; Ligangulua, who was a huge serpent that dominated the clouds; and Ganikalulua, who was a winged head that wandered through space. Each one believed they were the only living being in existence. Batala lived in a barren world with no life and felt lonely, wishing for companions. But he wondered how he could feed and shelter them in such a desolate place. The serpent, however, would descend to earth to explore. Seeing Batala sitting on a rock one day, she approached and asked who he was. Batala replied he was the universe's ruler. His serpent grew furious upon finding another being and challenged him to fight. The duel lasted 3 days and nights until Batala finally defeated and burned the serpent's entire body. Years later, the head appeared, Batala welcomed him, and they became close friends. Together, they chose to create life on Earth. That's how the story began. The next mythology here is Korean mythology, which is extremely difficult to find information about gods. Really, it's very hard. In fact, I don't even know if what I found here is actually real. But anyway, for example, Hanunin is the god of the sky, and Hwanun, son of Hwanin, descended to rule the earth. Teaching humans farming, medicine, and laws, his story links to the mythical founding of the kingdom of Gojosian. We also have Haimosu, who already has more information here thanks to the Portal of Myths. Haimosu, son of the celestial emperor, is the ancient founder of the kingdom of Boyel and father of Jumon. He descended to earth to rule humans. He is shown wearing a hat made of crow legs and holding Ion, the dragon's light sword. And to fly, he used a chariot pulled by 5 dragons, which was able to take him anywhere at the speed of the wind, always accompanied by 100 men riding on swans. Next is Persian mythology or Zoroastrianism, which centers on a supreme god or 2, depending on perspective. But the main god would be Ahura Mazda, the supreme god, goodness and all light, and the other so-called gods would be emanations of this same being. In response to him, he had his twin brother, Ahriman, who represents everything bad and was always trying to destroy what Ahura Mazda built. Now let's go to the mythology of Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, where we have beings like, for example, Makemake, who is the creator god of humanity and also a god associated with fertility. And most likely he had a bird's head, since they found some images of a man with a bird's head in the region, and it was probably this god. Ok is a destructive deity in mythology, responsible for shaping the region's geography. The myth says Rapa Nui was once part of a large continent called Pukupuripuri. Ok entertained himself by lifting and lowering large sections of land like a lever, nearly submerging the future Rapa Nui area. In some versions, he was also envious of Makemake. Eventually, his lever broke and he vanished. As a result, Rapa Nui remained as a small island, standing on the mountain peaks above the sea, while the rest of the continent became South America. And also in this mythology, we have Aku, who is present in the Crash Bandicoot game series. That's why I put this mythology in the 5th layer, instead of the much less known 6th. Well, the Aku-Akus would be described as supernatural beings, but very similar to humans. They are considered spirits of the dead. Some were further modified and can be male or female linked to specific island regions. It seems that they arrived with the colonizers. They were cannibals. Although they are not worshipped or given offerings, the Akus can be acknowledged before meals. They didn't believe they survived on just the smell of food. And if they are well fed, if they feel sympathy for someone, they can even help with household chores. Now, we've reached the 6th and final layer, and here are the completely unknown mythologies. I mean, not completely unknown, because if I know them, they're not completely unknown, but unknown to the general public. We begin with the mythology of the Mosquitos, or Mosquitos, an indigenous Central American people from the Mosquitia region. Their territory extends from Honduras to the Rio Grande in Nicaragua. And Toki would be a creator deity belonging to the beliefs of the mosquitoes, and she inhabits the Milky Way. And Toki is seen as a great scorpion mother. Actually, I think the right way to say it is scorpion mother. And she has several breasts. Her task is to take the newborn souls from the stars and set them on their journey of earthly existence. Likewise, she patiently waits in her home for the souls of the newly deceased to return to her. And Toki has a husband named Masahana, and together they are seen as the first mother and the first father. They are considered founders of several Central American indigenous tribes, besides the mosquitoes, including the Atoaxika, Yusko, Sumo, and Ulua. I also bring you the mythology of the Urartians, people from the ancient kingdom of Urartu, which was located in the region that is nowadays known as the Plateau. Armenians in the Iron Age worshipped Haldi, part of a divine triad with Shivni, the sun god, and Tespas, linked to thunder and storms. Haldi was the most important and became the supreme deity only during Ispuini's reign. His influence was so great among the Urartians that they even came to be called the children of Haldi. The king called himself the servant of Haldi, and many inscriptions included the phrase Haldini ish Makini, meaning by the will of Haldi. Before any war, the king sought his blessing, and in peace too. Roads, canals, and palaces were built for him. Haldi's main temple was in Ardini. It was filled with weapons, swords, spears, bows, arrows, and shields, earning it the name House of Weapons. An inscription, Assyria, by King Sargon. 2 tells in detail about the plundering of this temple in 714 before Christ, listing the weapons that were there. Another relevant mythology is Lusitanian mythology, with limited information available. It belongs to the ancestors of Portugal. After the Roman conquest, gods like Endovelicus, Atagina, Nabia, and Trebaruna became very popular in the region, like Bandua or Bandi, who is often mentioned in inscriptions as a male god, but once as a goddess. Often linked to cities or regions, he was viewed as a protector of communities. Associated with the Roman god Mars, possibly also as a god of war because of this. In one inscription, he is depicted as a god of the military standard. He was highly worshipped by the Galaici of Braga. Pormanicos was the god of hot springs, similar to the Gaulish god Pormanos. Nabia may have been a deity as well. Sometimes she appears together with Jupiter Mayo as his wife, other times identified as Diana, Juno, or Victoria, connected to protection, health, fertility, wealth, and sacred waters. Kossos was a warrior god, very popular among the southern Galacos, considered one of the most important in the region. Some scholars think he was the same god as Bandua under different names. Huey was likely the counterpart of Jupiter Lugos or Lukubo, and was a god of prosperity, commerce, and crafts. Associated, the Spear Conventina was the goddess of abundance and fertility, connected to the water nymphs. Her worship spread across various regions of Europe, from England to Galicia. Endovelicus was a prophetic and healing god who acted as an oracle. In the beginning, he was a minor god of the underworld, but later he ended up gaining a much higher role. Epona, goddess of fertility, protected horses, mules, and donkeys, and was depicted with a cornucopia. Here we also have the Selkna mythology, which belongs to the Selkna people, an indigenous people of Patagonia, in southern Argentina and Chile, including Tierra del Fuego. And their cosmology says that the cosmos was divided into 4 Shan, which are infinite skies, connected to the cardinal directions and the seasons. Kamuk was the north, symbolizing spring and summer. Kekruk, the south, winter. Zenanik, the west, autumn, and Wintek, the east. It may symbolize all seasons and the land itself, and was the most important of all. Being there, even the home of Temalkel, who was the supreme god. And although many characters seem like gods, only Temalkel is recognized as a deity. The others would be mythological ancestors with divine powers. The religion is henotheistic, worshiping one main god but not denying others exist. The other deities are divided into classes. We have, for example, the Huen, who would be mythological ancestors. There's Quenos, who is the first. Huen organized the earth and created the other ancestors, which are Wainape and Senuki from the north and south, Quinjo from the sea, Kren from the sun, Kree from the moon, Joshi from the snow, Cher from the wind. There's also Xiaoping, a female underworld spirit. The initiation ceremony, called Rainha, features her as a symbolic cannibal who attacks young Selknam. And there's Shorewits, who would be the companions of this Xiaoping, with the main ones being Sat, Yosik, Wakus, Kaya, Sel, Talon, Paus, and Sanu, many famous ones, like Kulani Koshominki, Halahashi Kotaisky, Hailan, Tanu, Yulin, with roles of representation and entertainment in the ceremony. And if you watched the video up to this point, remember to like, subscribe, and share the channel. Suggest ideas for the next iceberg or tier list. See you next time.